Good evening, this is Mike Caslin. I'm with GCSEN Foundation and the Summer Institute of Social Entrepreneurship at Wheaton College, and we're honored to have esteemed Highs alum, Georgia Beattie from Single Serve Wines. Thank you, Georgia.
Thanks for having me.
Yes, absolutely. We are pleased and thrilled to have you on our first case study. Georgia Beattie, From Classroom to Boardroom, the journey of social entrepreneur Georgia Beattie and single-serve packaging. What's it like, how does it feel to be on a case study when you just about 8 years ago were sitting in the classroom?
It was actually really, really hard to pull the information out because I needed to properly reflect on my process. Yeah, I can talk about concepts day to day, but to actually look at my journey and summarize that was incredibly hard.
What made it hard?
I think there's an emotional component where I needed to be real with what's happened and be honest, really honest with my mistakes and reflect on those. Writing them down is a lot more serious than just talking about them.
Yes, and going from ows to wows is sometimes hard. And now, you started out with your business plan. You were just sharing that you wrote a business plan as one of your last projects after our class together at Babson.
Correct.
And can you talk a little bit about that business plan, that initial plan, and how you built off of it, and maybe the strength that you gained from it?
So it was a really important process coming straight from university because although I'd grown up in the wine industry, my father was a winemaker, and we had, my brother and I were picking grapes at a young age. It was probably more child labour than anything, but I understood it in on the surface, but I needed to go in depth. And so the business plan allowed me to actually have a look at what the marketing, the finance situation was, what the reality was for the industry, and properly assess that.
You started out, you said, with a few pages, and you wound up having an 80-page business plan.
Yeah.
So you didn't just buy a software program that gave you an 80-page business plan. Tell us about that. No,
that took... It actually did take 6 months to do, and it was my final subject at university. So luckily I wasn't under huge pressure to turn it out in a week. I could properly go through the reports that I needed to. I could speak to the industry that I needed to, and getting. A true fact of the industry is when someone hands you money, and then they're committed to your product. But this was. I needed to engage them and talk about what this innovation would mean to them. So
innovation was fun, and you certainly had a great plan, and you attracted funding and interest. What were some of the, how come I didn't think about that in the early stages of this? You had secured funding, which is not too common.
The seed funding?
Yeah.
No, I raised funding off the business plan.
Right.
And the thing about wine is
but not every college student did that in your peer group,
no.
Right? Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
And the thing about wine is there is an emotional component to it, and so and an investor was also. It's alcohol has this other sort of, it plays in another field where it's cool to have an alcohol brand. So that was quite an interesting conversation. But the something I didn't address in my business plan was how conservative the wine industry families were. And so if you think about a 4-generation family that have grown up on the winery, putting their brand that they've looked after, blood, sweat and tears all the way through, putting it into this new package that they don't know what it's going to mean to the market could be damaging. And so they were quite risk adverse, and I realised it's a very conservative industry. That's why it took so long to get away from even the cork going to the Stelvin screw cap. That was a huge debate for the wine industry, even though it was going to improve the results for the longevity of the wine.
So we've covered selling at GCSEN, and so you went in and you were pitching your idea. What was it like to get turned down? Did they say, we're going to work with you, or we'll get back to you? What was kind of the soft turn down and the hard turn down that you experienced, and just trying to get a family to help you launch your business of single serve?
Well, I mean, people don't really like saying no, and they don't like, particularly someone, I mean, I was 23 when I started the company, and so people loved that I was a go-getter, putting myself out there, and so they didn't really want to say no. They would just be more avoidant.
Yes.
And so that was quite interesting. Did
you have a strategy? Like, okay, they didn't call me back. They didn't respond to my email. How many times did you try to get back in touch with them? Twice, 3 times, 15?
So there were two sides of the company. One was our own. So what the business plan was focused on was actually contract packaging for the wine industry. So what I learned is that I actually needed to go create my own brand to prove the market and to position it in a certain place with branding and pricing and at the right events. To then basically spoon feed the industry and say, look, you can be there too. And so so
you had to create your own brand.
Yes, and so that I didn't plan for financially, so we did that on a budget. But then I strategically placed the product in certain events, so there was one company we were going after, with Treasury Wine Estate, which is one of the largest wine companies in the world, and so I would strategically place the product and that I knew that they'd be out. Well, I mean, any outdoor event we were outselling them anyway, but we'd be outselling them so that their managers would then go back and say, "What is this Beattie product?" So it would be filtering around the company from on-premise to off-premise to catering and all over their key markets, and so that then it was a warm. When I walked into the company, they knew who I was, and so there was pretty strong strategy around those conversations.
Okay. Now, on the front of this case study, we have the Georgia Beattie balloon. What's it like to travel around? Do you commute by hot air balloon?
It's my primary source of transport.
What's that like?
Well, it makes it incredibly efficient going from rooftop to rooftop.
Oh, good.
And everyone knows I'm coming.
And does it work in the city as well?
Yeah, absolutely.
Hot air balloons?
No problem.
Excellent.
And anything goes in Australia.
Good. Well, from prior conversations, we also talked about not everything is just hot air balloons and sunshine. So maybe we could talk a little bit about frustrations or humble realizations. Maybe what about a team? In Australia, if you hire somebody, you said it's kind of tough to
So
fire them.
It's difficult to fire someone in Australia, and so which makes entrepreneurs employing very quite risk adverse, and it's a stressful process employing someone because you really need to know that you're making the right decision, and so that I've had some harsh lessons along the way. The biggest one though was my investor contributing to the business. And that was when I was raising capital, for me it was really important that the investor was going to be contributing to the growth of the company rather than just putting cash in. And so that was my first hire, I suppose, because I was handing my baby and they were joining the company. And so that was my first realization on the difficulties of partnerships and employment.
Can you talk a little bit about that negotiation of an investor coming in? You now have proven something, you've got some sales, and you need some money. What's it like? What's the negotiation range like?
Well,
he says, here's $5, I want 100% of your company. What are those numbers like when you were talking to that first investor?
Look, to be honest, I was a lot more willing to give up. Well, we were quite certain that we're only selling 20% of the company. But I tell you what, now when I'm going into, if I was going to raise capital again in another company, I will be looking at where the capital is coming from in just as much detail. Where entrepreneurs a lot of the time sort of think, yes, money, when actually you should be really double checking what are they going to do to the business? How are they going to affect you? How are they going to affect your staff? All those sorts of things.
So money has multiple dimensions beyond just increasing the number of commas or zeros in your bank account. what's one of the real world human dimensions of where that money comes from, that golden rule that you experienced?
What do you mean?
The golden rule, whoever has the gold rules. If you need their gold,
oh,
they
right.
rule you. Yeah?
What are the...
golden rule?
Yeah.
And if they have the gold and you need the gold, then they have a tendency to rule you.
Well, yeah.
Yeah. So, just what was it like?
I actually didn't experience that to the same extent, because we had a balance. We made sure the board was balanced.
Okay.
So that there's another element where one of the investors was also supplying parts of the dry goods that would go into our production line. And so that was where we had a major issue. Mm-hmm. And so
maybe let's unpack that a little bit. So
just let me give you a rundown of what we do. So one side of my factory, injection molds, a plastic, which I had one with me, a plastic wine glass, PET, recyclable glass, that then goes into the other side, which is a filling line. And so that's when the glasses are loaded, wine goes in, they're sealed and boxed, and then put into a container and shipped out. So what I was looking for is someone that could contribute and turn around any R&D we needed to do on the ground, on the production line. So there was one of our investors was a plastic injection molder, and so I thought that was perfect for basically getting the company up and running, and I thought that they could grow with the company. But what ended up happening was that they were actually, and it was always. We were always going to then license out the technology. So what we were doing is just proof of concept, manufacturing it ourselves in Australia with an export market, and then taking it global in a licensing model. But what ended up happening, the reality was that that investor was looking for a customer, and they were acquiring a customer. So we had an issue around quality of the plastic glasses, and they weren't up to scratch. And in any other scenario, I would then go shop that around the market to someone that had a better attention to detail. Where in this situation, I was stuck because they were an investor. I couldn't go and shop around the market. So my growth was capped.
How did you fix it?
Well, it's one of those things where we were talking about entrepreneurs being risk adverse. I needed to wait for the right time to jump on the issue, and so the only resolution in my mind was to buy out their shareholding, but I needed to afford it, and I needed to make sure that when I shared this news of our intentions, that they weren't going to then jeopardize the company. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so the timing was critical.
Were there elements of timing you could share? Was it just the time of season, the time of your financial strength of the company?
It was financial strength and making sure that I had the suppliers backed up, ready to roll in, so that it was seamless. Okay,
so your plan B really helped you. We also talked about, in Australia, the market's relatively small, and that from day one, you were globally thinking.
Yep.
Compared to the U.S. market, which is very inward-looking. Can you talk about those countries, the first countries that you started to look at, and how you were able, at a relatively young age, in a somewhat probably either government-controlled or male-controlled environment, were able to navigate, into South Korea or Japan, etc.
So we don't have the luxury to only sell within Australia, because there's only 24-25 million people. So we've always got that international outlook straight away, and we've got Asia right at our doorstep. Our strategy was to work with the key influencing markets for Asia. Asia's a huge market. Our targets were Korea, Japan, Hong Kong, Singapore, and a little bit of. We've also got an office in Taiwan, but. So what we found, and this is what was fleshed out of the business plan, and my time travelling in the area, is that they're the key influencers in the area. And so if your product succeeds in those markets, then it will flood out into the others, which has been the case. So we needed to focus on those markets, and that's just a matter of going to a trade show. I'd make sure that I did a lot of press and contacted magazines so they knew I was coming, and looking for an entrepreneurial partner there for us to then expand.
Very cool. On the scaling to Asia, we've talked about this before. You didn't go out and open up your own office in every country, but you have an office in every country. Could you talk about that innovation?
So around finding partners in the markets. So for me, it was finding a similarly minded entrepreneur in each market to partner with me, so that I had my eyes in that market, but they had lived there and they knew it far better than I. So that was really key, and it was a win-win for both of us, having those partnerships in each market. And that way, where I'm not stuck with these overheads, and the company can grow and expand the staff and the requirements of the company can grow and expand with the company's growth. With
the company's growth of sales and product, yep. How do you know what's going on? How do you know who's doing good sales? We talked a little bit about, is it Xero accounting as a service, cloud-based accounting service? Why invest in that?
So everything's transparent. So
everything's transparent.
I know
not only from your end, but also from the other end of folks that are repping you?
Well, I mean, from the moment I put in an order for a cardboard box, that's put into the system, and I know how many days it takes to get to the factory, and so it's in the system, because that's money. Every box is, for me, $1.50. So I want to know exactly where every box is, and so they'll go into the system and onto the production line, and then we just created little apps for clarity and transparency on the company, so that everyone, whether they were packing the wines on the production line at the other end, so that they knew where their threshold of when they were efficient and when they were inefficient. And so then once that product left our factory, I know exactly how many boxes are in a container, and then I can see which country they're going to and how quickly they're moving.
And also, what about sales? We're going to be working on sales tomorrow. I think sales, you mentioned, is a very key engine for you. How did you know folks were doing well or not so well in sales? What was the way that system, reporting system, helped you?
So, I mean, there's an element where you do have to be on the market. You have to be on the ground in those markets occasionally, but there are key. You're able to, with cloud computing, you are able to look at key customers, and you can track their growth. And so if one of those customers has been highlighted as a key customer for influence in the market, then you really want to be watching that growth. And so we'll have buzzers that will jump out that if they haven't ordered, then I get an email. And so there's just lots of little gates that we've set up, so that I don't need to be thinking about it all the time.
Right.
I'll get that alert that so and so in Taiwan hasn't put an order in. What's happened?
So to take care of both the production side, the marketing side, the selling side, what type of management meetings do you have or not with your key team? And is it like every Monday, every Wednesday? Is it 1 hour? Is it teleconference? What's your way of staying connected to the people you depend on to make your company go?
It's a pretty casual basis, and there's transparency on the P&L and what their contribution to the P&L is. And so whether you're in sales or whether you're in the production line. There's ways of measuring your contribution, and so then they're able to see whether they can make some changes, and they can act like entrepreneurs at whatever level. And it's also a way of upskilling them, because they are looking at other areas of the business. They can then see what the function in the warehouse is versus the production line.
So it sounds like you're innovating even in a management system with open book management. Not only do you get this instant information, your colleagues are getting it, both on the production side and the sales side and expense side, and you're requiring them to read it and to know it and to report on it.
Yeah, and there's no human error. It's the facts. and then we work with those, rather than relying on someone's opinion that might have a bias to articulate what's happening in the business right now.
Very good. We'd like to open up our questioning to our students. Thoughts from our students on reading the case.
What was it like during your first couple of pitches? How did you overcome your nervousness from having to speak in public and convince people of your product?
Number one, they're investing in you, so they really want to make sure you know what you're talking about, and it's just about, you've just got to get out there. The more you stand out in front of a crowd, the more comfortable you'll get. And when you know what you're talking about, it's not, it's your business, and so when you know what you're talking about, you've got nothing to lose. There's nothing to be nervous apart from the fact, like when you're nervous, it means you care. It's a really good thing. When you're walking out to something, feel a little bit of nerves, go, right, I'm ready to do this. And so it just took time. But for the first few meetings, I didn't want to be the really important ones. They were sort of more low-hanging fruit that I could that would give me a little bit of feedback that weren't family and friends, but they weren't the key investor that I really wanted to win.
How did you get the ball initially rolling? Did you have a prototype before you got initial investing, or did you just sell the investors just off of your whole business plan alone? How did that end up?
It was, I saw a similar concept in the UK, and it was based around what had been done there and then what changes we were making. So it is good to show an example of its success, and then show how you're contributing. It then grounds the concept, so you can ground it, and then this is what we're doing.
Your family comes from a long line of vintners.
Vintners, yeah.
What do they think about this new innovation? Are they on board? Are they some of the conservative people that you had to initially overwhelm your enthusiasm?
So they love it now that I've proven it. But I tell you what, at the start, Dad laughed at the start. That was a bit rude. And my brother's a sommelier for I don't know if you know Heston Blumenthal, high-end dining. So he's really gone down the rabbit hole of on the sort of fine wine side. And so my mother's sort of a Chardonnay drinker. And Chardonnay is quite a sort of conservative wine. So there's no, amongst my family, there were no sort of open-minded innovators in wine. So it was something that I needed to just go prove. But it was that gave me a lot of fire, because every time I got a little bit of a clue and I could go back and tell them that they were wrong. It was incredibly satisfying. So that's something that pushed me each week.
I have two questions. First, so you just tapped into this $1 billion company, and there's been market of wine industry. And from your case study, what I got was you were more so bringing a different innovation towards packaging and how bottles are made for wine. And I really loved how some statistics kind of went for your favor of how you can efficiently save time and package well all this wine and everything. So I want to know how you came about that idea first. And second thing, you said to have your product be noticed by these big wine industry, this specific country, you said you were putting your bottles out in the tables, but how were you actually contracting your bottles to be out there if you were just starting into the market?
So your first question's around where did I get the idea?
With the packaging.
With the packaging. So I was at a Melbourne music festival, and I waited half an hour in the line. It was my turn to buy my girlfriends a round of drinks, and I got to the front of the bar, and I asked for 3 glasses of wine, and they said, no, you can't have wine. You can have beer or something in a can, like a spirit mixed spirit in a can. And I mean, that was outrageous for me after I'd just been waiting 30 minutes in the line, and I asked them why, and they said it's because it's too dangerous to serve outdoors. And there was also, after I delved a little bit deeper, I mean, it's more expensive for them to serve because they've got double wastage. So they've got the bottle, which they're then pouring into a plastic glass, which they have to pay for, and hand it over to the crowd. And so they're then having to throw this out, which is expensive at events, which is the bottle. And then they've got a plastic glass out in the crowd. And so what we're doing is just cutting out the bottle out of the equation, and packaging it in the glass. And so then they can throw them out into the crowd as quickly as other packaging. So if you look at the way beer and spirits have innovated, they've been incredibly progressive. I mean, spirits have even mixed Coke or ginger ale, whatever it is, in the can with the spirit. And beer started out in a 750ml bottle, and they've brought it down to a small 375ml, so you can drink directly from it. And so they've made it more and more convenient. Where wine, because it's a very traditional market, it hasn't been innovated in. So with the packaging design, it needed to look and feel like what the existing behaviours were on the market. That's why it needed to be a wine glass shape. And it needed to be a really high quality glass.
So there was a moment of pivot for you from thinking about, introducing a package like a strong bottle to producing wine as well, because I think that came later. Because was that your initial thought to not only come up with a bottle but also sell wine?
No, it was purely so that I could. So within 12 months, I was selling at that festival, and so I wanted to serve wine in the glass for myself. I was lucky there was another market for it. Otherwise, I'd have a lot of wine to drink.
Well, we have so many more questions. Maybe we can pick up another part of our interview tomorrow. And we want to, how about a round of applause for Georgia Beattie?